Good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rylan Higgins in the Anthropology Department here at St. Mary's University, and also on the Board of Directors of the Canadian Centre for Ethics and Public Affairs. On behalf of the board and the staff of SISEPA, I want to welcome you here tonight. So for those of you who don't know, SISEPA is co-founded by St. Mary's University and the Atlantic School of Theology. The mandate for the organization is to provide an arena for critical thought, public discussion, and research into current ethical challenges in society. And the organization goes about doing that in three primary ways: by supporting research, by events like you see here tonight, the various programming that SISEPA has done, and by helping organizations and groups create frameworks for dealing with ethical challenges. SISEPA's approach is a collaborative approach. SISEPA basically partners with a wide variety of groups, organizations, and sectors, towards the goals of bringing various programs forward. And with that in mind, I'd like to thank our partner for this particular event, which is, of course, part of a series, a racism series. If you're just coming out for the first time as part of the series, we've done two other sessions in the four-part series on white perspectives and black perspectives. Tonight we'll be dealing with immigrant perspectives, and then we'll also be having one on indigenous perspectives with a date to be announced. Our program partner is Dr. Ingrid Waldron, somewhere here in the crowd tonight. Hello. And Ingrid runs the ENRICH project, and Ingrid's initiatives deal with environmental noxiousness, racial inequalities, and community health. We'd also like to thank our sponsors for the event at Dalhousie University, in both the President's Office and the Faculty of Health Professions. Quickly, I also want to welcome our live stream audience out there. I'm sure listening. Hello. You are invited to participate in the question and answer session coming up quite soon. And you can do this by either logging into the live chat option through YouTube, or you can also use SISEPA's Facebook or Twitter or email. If you missed the two presentations that have already taken place, you can also see them in SISEPA's archives, essentially, which you can access through the SISEPA webpage. I want to remind people to evaluate tonight's event. You all have little pieces of paper in front of you, and that's the evaluation form. They're very effective and helpful for us, so please take time to do that. As you leave tonight, table's back there. As you leave tonight, please look at the information. There are DVDs, there's various programs that we've had recorded or available, as well as some other information. So please take a chance to, an opportunity to take a look at those things as well. All right. Our moderator this evening is Sharon Davis-Murdoch, and I'm going to read her bio. Sharon Davis-Murdoch describes herself as a social justice champion, a public servant for over 20 years. Sharon has used her political science background and public policy experience to initiate provincial government firsts. The first provincial guidelines for culturally competent primary health care in Canada is an example of her accomplishments, which include engaging local, national, and international stakeholders in numerous policy collaborations. Sharon received the Premier's Award for Excellence in 2007 and 2015. She now works at the community level and is co-president of the Health Association of African Canadians and the health lead for the local Immigrant Partnership. Please join me in welcoming Sharon, who will now formally introduce our panel.
Thank you very much, Rylan, and good evening, everyone. I would like to begin by sort of giving an overview of what I'll be doing here as the moderator. I'm going to lay out the ground rules for discussion, and how the Q&As work intermittently throughout the evening. I certainly want to, as well, introduce the panel. So first of all, though, I want to speak a bit about the rules of engagement. SHSEPA prides itself on respectful exchange and debate of ideas. It's therefore important to have some rules of engagement for public events. Please turn off your cell phones. We ask that you are respectful in the questions that you pose and in the statements that are made, as well as in our responses to what we've heard. So we ask that no one heckles, please, no heckling. We're going to have, in the way that the evening will flow, a short presentation from each of the panelists who will give you a sense of where they are or their perspective. Following that, we will move directly to the audience questions so that you are going to be involved in the conversations as quickly as possible. There are microphones set up for you in the room. As well, I would certainly like to welcome the live stream audience. We invite you to participate in the Q&As by using your chat screen. Your questions will be passed along to me and then through to the appropriate panelist. As well, there are time limits for the forum. This is a forum for the exchange of perspectives on the issues, so it is our goal to hear multiple perspectives, and we are really quite serious about time limits for each questioner. So, and that includes our panelists. So we ask that even if you're inclined to go there, that you do not indulge us with speeches this evening or monologues or long personal stories. This is an opportunity for learning, and sometimes that's best done by listening to others. As well, we do have evaluations for you, and so we would ask that the audience please fill out the evaluations that were on your chairs, because it's an important way for SHSEPA to learn what works best. And finally, our objective here is to conclude by 8:30 p.m. So we will be taking the last question at 8:20, and then we'll have some closing remarks. All right, so I'm going to move on to introduce our wonderful panel of speakers here. I'll do that, and then following that, each panelist has been given 2 minutes to share with you their perspectives. They're not moving on to answer any questions or anything at this point, but they're going to give you a kind of a view or their perspectives for a short time, and then we'll move on after that to questions. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce this great panel. First, we have Nanok Cha, who is the ISANS Welcoming Communities Program Coordinator. Nanok Cha came to Canada in 2001 as an international student, and she finished her master's degree in women's studies right here at St. Mary's University. She works at ISANS as a Welcoming Communities Program Coordinator, and in that role, she supports community service providers to welcome immigrants in their communities. She is also vice principal of the Korean school, where immigrant children learn about their Korean heritage, culture, and language. As well, after that, we're going to hear from Dr. David Haase from the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie. Dr. Haase attended medical school in Jamaica before coming to Canada in 1977 to pursue postgraduate training in internal medicine and infectious diseases. He is presently working part-time in internal medicine and is past president of the Health Association of African Canadians. Then we will hear from Louise Wang, who is an immigrant, and she is a member of the Migrant Women's Association of Halifax. Louise Wang came to Canada as an international student in 2008 and immigrated in 2012. Born in Beijing, Louise received her MBA in Community Economic Development from Cape Breton University. Currently, she is completing an ISANS work placement and serves on the board of the Immigrant Migrant Women's Association of Halifax and co-leads the youth committee of the Halifax Local Immigration Partnership, which is of the Health and Wellness Committee. And finally, we will hear from Mohamed Yaffa, who is Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator at Capital Health. Mohamed migrated from Sierra Leone to Nova Scotia some 16 years ago. He and his family were quick to get involved in community. He identifies as a Black, African, Sierra Leonean, Muslim Canadian. Try that fast 3 times. These layers of Mohamed's identity have had profound implications for him and his family and have impacted their experience. Mohamed works as a coordinator for diversity and inclusion for the Nova Scotia Health Authority. So will you join me in welcoming this great panel this evening? So I had the lucky task of deciding who I would call on first. And I have done that, and will ask them to speak for 2 minutes. So I think I would like to begin with you, Nanok. Would you?
Sorry for being antisocial because I have only 2 minutes. So first, according to racism in Canada, here are a few to share about me. I'm an obedient Asian woman, and I'm a bad driver, and I'm a nanny of my own daughter who looks more like a white kid. My previous job, my manager asked someone else to do my work because I might be overwhelmed. Challenging it, I am overly sensitive. Second, challenging racism. I had amazing opportunities to have deeper healing conversations on racism with other racialized immigrant women, African Nova Scotian women, and Mi'kmaq elders. Sharing similar and different painful stories and learning their resilience helped me to heal my trauma and challenge racism. And I have built some safe space from racism and allies here as my community. Third, learning from my work on welcoming communities and racism. When immigrants come here, we hear little about the history of indigenous people and African Nova Scotians. And yet, we, racialized immigrants, share a lot in common with them when it comes to racism and discrimination. We needed to understand better and build a solidarity to fight against racism. And yet, I am very privileged to say that I will and I can go back to my home country if I have to keep struggling because of racism in Canada and my health gets worse because of it. There are so many immigrants in Canada who do not have that option. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, you set a good example for timekeeping there. Thank you very much. And Dr. Haase is next.
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening, everyone. My 2-minute perspective. Coming from Jamaica, where a system where we were in the majority, to coming to Nova Scotia, where I found myself in a system of being in the minority, was quite an awakening. And I found myself caught between the realities because you look at me and the color of my skin and my kinky hair, which used to be black at one time. And in the minds of some people in the white community, I belong to a certain category, like the policeman that stopped us late at night and said, where do you think you're driving? You think you're in Montreal? And I didn't understand what that meant initially, but I eventually came to know that. And the other reality of trying to relate to people who looked like me, but who were somewhat suspicious and mistrustful because I really was not from here. So, you know, it was a challenge, and so here we are today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haase. Thank you. Louise?
Thank you, Sharon. I would like to use my 2 minutes to give an overview on the impact of Chinese community living in Nova Scotia. First of all, Chinese immigrants have made tremendous contribution to the Canadian society, from railway building across the country to enhancing Canadian labor force. However, we were only paid half as a person. Secondly, it is striking how many examples of racism I have witnessed. With respect to systemic racism, I have witnessed Chinese students have been taken advantage of financially and emotionally. The attitude towards the Chinese is they're meek, silent, and not going to fight back. For example, some of the Chinese students been kicked out of their homestays because they were accused of doing some damages that they didn't do. Homestay is when international students have been hosted by Canadian families for a long period of time. Another example is when when the assumption is made of all Chinese people are good at technology, math, accounting, and such skills. Employers tend to hire them for such skills rather than other skills they may have. Also, people making assumptions about all Asians are the same. However, we're not. We have different culture, different living experiences, and speak a different language. The other kind of racism is overt, which is directly doing harm to others. For example, directed to me when I was walking down the street with my friends. I have heard people saying, "Get out of the country and go back to China." It can be both systemic and overt. For example, I have heard people making remarks when they're shopping as what is not made in China. There is also internalized racism, which means people from the Chinese community working against other Chinese. For example, some early Chinese immigrants and the second-generation Chinese immigrants are speaking negatively about the new Chinese immigrants and students. They are not supporting the new Chinese commerce in their studies, career developments, and settlements. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. And finally, Mohamed.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Good evening, everyone. I believe that racism is lingering because of the enslavement that we know in history, colonialism. So after enslavement, the enslavers followed the enslaved to the new countries, one of which was Sierra Leone, and colonized them and gave them weapons against the locals. So it's a very, very gloomy history. And from there, after the independence, came neocolonialism. And with this spreading in the West, in the media, people look at, especially black people from Africa, with a different set of eyes than they would look at other people. Now, the reality of racism in this country is very pervasive. I'll give you a few examples. I was once followed into the Canadian Tire store and was told to put my bag back at the counter. And me being a black man just didn't want to leave the aisles where I was already shopping to come back to the counter and give people the impression of maybe this is one of the thieves within this place and he's just been seen again going with his backpack. So I pleaded with the lady to say, please just let me shop, and when I finish, I can open my bag for you to check it. She ended up calling the police on me. So racism is lingering, I think, because of government policies as well. We saw the Ebola crisis that erupted in West Africa and the response of our government, which does not look good. And I believe if that had happened anywhere else, especially in Europe, our response would have been different. So it creates this sense of difference in the minds of people. Now, the impact of racism for me has manifested in many ways. I have a big, serious fear for my own safety and that of my loved ones, especially my children growing up here, because of many of the experiences that I have gone through here. The day-to-day mental occupation and apprehension about who is thinking what of me being in this store. And never finishing the process of being part of this society is another one. Because every now and then somebody tells you to take your whatever colored, whatever part of your body back to Africa. I hear that a lot, and you'll be surprised if you were, because you are not in my shoes, probably. But I believe that history can be rewritten, education can help, and the efforts that are going on to change, if supported, we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, panel, for some very thoughtful beginning remarks for us, and hopefully that will frame some of your thinking this evening as well. We're going to start with a question that I'm going to put out for the panelists, and it may be that they don't all answer, but it'd be nice if they did. So I would like to pose the question to you all. How is racism holding us back? How is racism holding us back in Nova Scotia? Anyone want to go first?
I think one way racism is holding us back, it is not allowing people of racialized communities, members of racialized communities, to put in their full potential into what they are able to do. For example, when you are psychologically divided and at work, for example, like one of the panelists mentioned here, when your boss does not trust in you, it just does not allow you to be who you are because you are mentally not fully there. You're partly removed from what you're doing, trying to solve this neuromental problem that is going on with you. And I believe, and I've heard it from other colleagues, that people of racialized communities work harder because they want to show that they can do the job. So it's taking more effort, and it's not making us any better productive. I believe that's one way racism is holding us back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other panelists want to comment?
Yeah. Before I say what is holding us back as Nova Scotia back, I say, well, racism is holding our personal goals back. Like we're not able to get some students were not able to get the apartment they wanted, and because they don't have someone to co-signing the lease, or they couldn't pay 3 months of rent ahead of a time, or they're not able to get the job they wanted because they talk down to themselves as they lose their confidence in themselves because they don't think they can do what they wanted to do in their dreams. They think, well, I can only do math. I can only be an accountant. I change my profession to do another course because that I'm only trusted in doing math. And it's also creating mental health issues by constantly facing challenges and issues and trying to solve all the problems. And because they want to change to a better living situation. And I mean, there are a lot of pressure on Chinese people because the pressure to succeed, not only because that we have limited choices, but also most of us, the only child of the family, and as according to the China one child policy, that we have a lot of pressure being put on by our families and relatives. And if we're stressed, we are not going to be able to contribute to the society as 100% of ourselves. As I mentioned at the beginning of my 2 minutes, that we are a tremendous contribution to the Canadians' labor force. If we are not able to give 100% of ourselves, then this is how racism holding us back as Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Louise.
So just to add to the debate, I think racism perpetuates a system of discrimination where one segment of society is held at a lower level, where there is inequality in terms of access to so many things, and education is the one that's really on top of my mind and at the forefront of my heart now. That's a key one we can talk about. And I think it's not just the access, but it means, therefore, that there is a group of people who don't have the opportunities, and Mohamed alluded to that as well, to get into the workforce and to move ahead and to contribute to the society as well.
Thank you, David. Nanu, did you want to?
Can I?
Yeah.
So for me, I think I'm feeling like I have to behave in certain situations. So, I think we are so reactive about racism. So one incident happens and, people say, oh, what do you think about, and give some explanations. And, it's because of white privileges and all that. And say, oh, yeah, we have to aware of it. And then it goes away. And the incident happens again. And then we just recognize it. And it really drains us who really want to make changes. And it's, racism is violence. And when we go out, somebody harass you verbally or physically because you are Asian or because you are black, and you limit yourself from those public spaces that you have rights, and it's oppression, and you are in this situation, you have to make sure that you are in a safe space. And whenever I go any situations, I'm counting how many people are white and how many people are with me, and how many allies are here, and then how much I can say, and how much I can say that you really have to deal with it. But then, oh, can I say this? Maybe not this situation. Maybe it really threatened my job, or maybe I don't want to be the angry, now creating angry Asian woman in this situation. So I have to measure that all the time, depending on what kind of spaces I'm in.
Well said. So there you have it. And this is an opportunity for you to join the conversation. We are able to take a question from the audience at this stage. Is anyone willing to be the first questioner? Microphones, could you come to the microphone as well, where they're set up, so everyone can hear you?
Thank you for your contributions. It's very both disheartening to hear what's happening and inspiring to now kind of create a fire and try to take steps forward. So my question is, what steps could we all take now? What are some practical steps that every individual could take to help better these situations and create more awareness?
Anyone on the panel want to tackle that?
Yeah.
Okay, you go ahead.
Maybe I'll go. I just see a lot of people that made me be here sane in Nova Scotia, and I see a lot of faces of my allies here, so I'm just so glad to see that. And that's something that I want to point out, that you can be allies, and you have to use your privileges in the right, positive ways. And a lot of why folks come to me and then say, so what can I do? And what I cannot say to you that why can you give up your job for somebody who have a similar, it's harsh on, could be somebody, but maybe not giving up your job, but maybe consider that as an HR person or, just to see, it's, I cannot educate, we racialized people educate a lot of times, but I think you have to educate to how to use your privileges positive way to deal with it. And as an Asian woman, I have to say that I have a lot of privileges, and I have to deal with the harassment and violence happening. Who is wearing hijabs on the street, and I have to recognize my own privileges as well.
So, thank you very much for that comment. To me, racism is a monster with many heads. There is a Greek mythological monster called the Hydra. I don't know how many of you here are Greek scholars, but anyway, you cut off one head and it would grow back in 2 or 3 heads, etc. So there's no one kind of easy fix, and it needs to be addressed on a lot of different levels. I think one of the levels, though, is that there are many people in our community who need to acknowledge, we need to own that racism is real, and it's not something that we should continue to shy away from. When you look at me and say you don't see my color, it's not real to you. It's you're hiding away, and a lot of people have subconscious subliminal racism, and we need to own it. All of us need to own that racism exists, and I think that's a first step as an individual. Having forums like this where we can speak openly to each other and, not sort of beat each other up, but acknowledge that things aren't the way they should be, I think is a good step in that direction. I also think that, and I keep coming back to our educational system, because I see that's a major part of what's going on here, where certain racialized minority groups do not have the access they should have, even the mindset they should have to say, yes, we can, and we will, and we can rise above where we are now. And I think things need to be done to help that situation, to start, for instance, with children, even before they get to school, where they can recognize the fact that they can rise above their situation, and they can be, and they can do. They can become professionals, just like anybody else in our society. So it's going to take some effort. It's going to take commitment, I think, as individuals and as a society as a whole.
Thank you. Mohamed, did you want to?
Yeah, I believe that one way we can fight racism is to change the narrative about our communities. When I came here newly, my first week, I learned many of the stereotypes about the First Nations people right here through a friend that I made at the hotel who took me downtown and driving on Cogswell, not Cogswell, where the Cornwallis Street, pointed at a native person and said, "You see that guy? He's very talented. He's Indian, but he's alcoholic just like all of them." So that was the first thing I heard about the Aboriginal people in this country. That was the first thing I ever heard about them. Okay, so I'm going to take another example. I come from Sierra Leone, where we learn in school about Nova Scotia and Sierra Leone and the connection between these two places. So every Sierra Leonean longs to come to Nova Scotia, this place that is an origin of part of our ancestry, right? And I'm not going into all of that history. So because of that narrative, I have some kind of understanding and respect and some knowledge about Nova Scotia, even before meeting Nova Scotians. People in Nova Scotia, many of them don't even know the name Sierra Leone, or didn't know before the Ebola crisis or before the war 20 years ago. And that's a big issue. So the history of the people have to be taught, because the respect for African Nova Scotians here will spill on other Africans that come here. But if they are disrespected here, and they have been here for hundreds of years, generations, what do I expect from the Nova Scotians? So it just is not going to happen. Right? That is one. So talking about allies, I'm an imam in the community. I belong to the Muslim community. Anytime there is some terrorism or attack or atrocity or something that is done somewhere else, and we take it wanting to just decimate Muslims, we get the Christian community reaching out to the Muslim community every single time and say, we are with you, we want to know what you want us to do, we will come to your mosque on Friday and listen to the sermon and say words of solidarity. So being allies and changing the narrative will go a long way to combating racism, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohamed. Did you want a word?
Sure. Thank you for a very good question. I think to answer that question first, I think we should raise the awareness of racism, to speak up. And secondly, I think as a society, we need to be inclusive and accommodating. Not being inclusive and accommodating is part of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act, but it also should be our society moral obligation, I personally think. And also, thirdly, I think we should all give each other a second chance. When you hear someone that with an accent or using a wrong word, don't just assume they don't know what they're talking about. Giving them a second chance, giving them a second opportunity. Ask, what do you mean? And ask them, is that what you meant? Like really being respect and inclusive and trying to be accommodating. Once again, I think being inclusive and accommodating is one of the keys. I think that's what I would say on that question.
Thank you. Now I'm able to take a live stream question. Does somebody want to give me one? Okay. Okay. All right. Take another question. So I'm going to ask the panel another question, just to get us moving around history. How and why do the impacts of history persist? Does anybody want to take a look at that? How and why do the impacts of history persist? Yep.
Do you mind? Well, at the very beginning, I said the Chinese came to Canada building railways, and that's in the past, like decades ago. And they're as well known as cheap labor. And that image carries on till today. And I know there's forms, there's organizations who hire Chinese because they can pay them half of what they're paying for the regular Canadians. They can ask them to do double for the job, but don't have to pay them for the full amount because they know the Chinese are not going to complain and they're going to take what they get and just sneak quietly and being happy about it and not going to raise an issue. And it happens right here in Nova Scotia.
Impacts of history. Anyone else want to?
I think it's a similar line that I just want to mention that immigration policy itself is very racialized, and it's a matter of who are deserving to come in to Canada or not, and that's been very harsh in the conservative government before, and see what's going to happen now. But it shows that where I think what the immigrants have to be just vulnerable on if I'm deserving to staying here or not, all the history of immigration.
So we do have a question from the live stream audience, and this is one you can think about. Isn't the word allies setting up opposition, this person wants to know, as it presumes a war? That's the question. From the panel or from the audience, I think we could be flexible. Anybody want to?
Yeah, I'll take that on.
Okay.
I'm ready. It is a war. It is a war. Let's name it for what it is. And the fact that there are battle lines drawn, and who's winning this war, right? And what is the impact on those who are losing? I mean, we need to acknowledge that it is a battleground that we're in, and that's why we're here. And, that's why you're here. And I really appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to come out to have this dialogue with us, because that's the only way we're going to make a difference. That's the only way we're going to meet in the middle, somewhere. Thank you.
Are we hearing from Ron? Okay, all right. On the allies question, indeed.
So I had this question before the ally question came up, but my wife is an immigrant from Vietnam, and I would say one of the forms of racism, and this sort of a variant on what Louise was talking about, direct racism, is that from allies, where they assume that she's vulnerable and in need of their help. And I'm wondering if you've experienced something similar.
As personally?
Sure.
I agree and I disagree. I agree because I do have experienced situation where people think that I'm vulnerable, and however, as a person that I strongly believe in diversity and social inclusion and fair fights, so I always trying to present the stronger self of me, and I can cry at home, but I always fight back. That's why I'm here today, trying to speak up for the Chinese.
Can I just mention about?
Yes, by all means.
So I think I'm not using my allies, but so I have allies and I know who they are from my workplace and in my community in general. And I think it's any racial incident happens and I don't know what's going on, but my heart is beating and I cannot breathe and something is up, and then I will go to them to just debrief. And that's how you create space, safe space for that. I think that's the beginning of, you be available and to be in a space of safe, safe. You feel safe. And I think I just want to give you an example there how you can, I want to be ally as well. So one instant was that there was an intern at ISANS, and she is racialized, the second generation immigrant woman who went to the law school, and then she's going into law. And she wants to know the opportunity in up north. And then my husband, who is a white Canadian-born male, went to up north as a lawyer. And then I said, "Oh, why don't you come and talk to him, so find out how it looks like." And she said, "Oh, yeah, I will come with my boyfriend, who is a white man." So I have to tell my partner that, okay, they are coming, but you are not going to talk to white men, not giving the information. You are going to talk to the racialized woman that I invited, and to make sure to use your privilege in the right way. So I think it is like a small, tiny things, but if you can make it happen because you have resources, that might change someone's life better.
Okay, thank you. There was, yes.
Thank you so much for sharing the strategies and for sharing your own experiences. That is totally inspiring. But, well, you mentioned that it is a war zone. It is a war zone. It is hostile environment. These are what you call that, band-aid, solutions. Listen, when the constitution of this country was created, we were not in mind people. When the education system was created, when the policies were made, we were not in anybody's mind. And I think that is what we do need to change. We live in Canada. We deserve better. We expect better of Canada. We have to hold it accountable. We have to hold the system accountable. We should talk about, systemic racism and racism in the education system. The most hostile environment for us and for our children are the schools now. Thank you.
All right, we have a couple more live stream questions, and I think they will motivate people to respond. So one of them is this: why is it that there is more hostility towards immigrants that excel in school or other areas of life as opposed to those who are struggling? It's an interesting question. Does anybody want to tackle an answer to that?
What was the
The question was, why is it that there is more hostility towards immigrants who excel in school or other areas of life as opposed to those who are struggling? This is this person's take on that. Yes.
I think it's obvious, because when somebody is weak and you don't see them as a threat. Now, when somebody is challenging you for a reason, getting ahead, you think that they are challenge and threat to in the fight for resources. So that might come from that angle, because everybody is trying to be successful and everybody is trying to get to the top of the ladder. So the ones that are down. So nobody kicks a. I don't want to say that saying, because it's not a nice one. But people are fighting to get up. So if they find you were not born here, or you don't belong to the majority culture, and at the same time you are really doing just as much or even better than people who are born here, so you are likely to get more challenges, and there will be more hostility towards you. I think. That may be simplistic, but that's the way I say it.
Okay. Yes, David?
So I think, and I just want to draw that out a little bit more, Mohamed. I think there are two sides to that. One side potentially is that you should be staying in your place. You shouldn't be climbing up here with me and doing whatever you're doing, and maybe even taking my job is the one thing. And I'm not going to say where that might come from. And the other part is what you alluded to, is that when you're lumped in with a particular group and you're rising above that, then that group you're lumped in with may look at you with, ill favor because you're getting ahead and they're not. But again, it's a deep problem in terms of coming from somewhere like Jamaica, where education was something that we took for granted, that everybody had the opportunity, to coming here where, enough.
Okay, I see that there are two people at the microphone, so why don't we, you may be responding to a question, or, yes, go ahead, sure.
Hi, everyone. I want to speak a fact. If you're not native Canadian here, you're immigrant, period. So this racist is not like, as Louise speak before, I fully agree, as one of international students, one Chinese that struggle with immigrant in Canada. And I just want to say, what you have been presented, that all I've been through, and that was a moment for my emotion as well. I as a Chinese, I've always been told by my Canadian friend, you're not typical Chinese. Yes, I hate math, I hate technology, I fully hate those. And I took major in psychology and gender women study. Now I'm a registered mental health counselor. And not Chinese person does this. And what I found, that's my question. Since I became a counselor, I realized it's very hard for me to co-work with many other professional people because in the higher education, cross-culture is not being taught. We cannot blame overall the population don't understand this because in our school, it's not being taught. People are not getting the information correctly. So when I talk a lot of professionals, and they told me, I really like to help immigration, like help Chinese students, but we don't know how because we do not know the knowledge. So at this point, I want to ask for you here, how can we in the future not just being awareness to the overall population, but make the notice and awareness among the higher education, make those professional people have the awareness to know what we have been through and how to help immigrations in Canada and Nova Scotia. Thank you.
Any panelists want to respond to that?
Well, thank you for your support, and I think having an event like this is an opportunity for us to speak the facts, speak the truth, and to share any information that we have been held back for a long time, and to answer the question how in the higher level education level that this should be embedded into everyday studies, and that should be embedded into course outlines, and this should be embedded into every single step that you do, because if you should have given people the opportunity to talk about who you really are, how you really think, and what you really do.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Just in the health system, which is what I'm familiar with, we have cultural competency guidelines, and I think we should think about how to have those embedded in all the sort of systems that we work in, so that there's a set of guidelines that people do have to live up to that will help at the higher level, because by then it's too late, right? They're already gone through into the higher level of learning, that people are more aware and sort of include those in their teaching and their thinking, as they go forward. So, in the health system, certainly that is something. And Mohamed, you're familiar with that as well.
Yeah, I think there has been a lot of work. Sharon has done some work around that, talking about the health system to create changes. I can tell you it's a very hard one. And the reason it's hard is not because it's hard in itself to do. It's because leadership has not embraced it. It's that simple. When leadership embraces it and communicates that this is our priority, it will happen. We were talking about refugees. We are calling refugees almost terrorists when we had a prime minister, and now we're calling them as part of the Canadian society when we have another prime minister. So leadership has a lot to do with it.
Good point. Very good point. May I ask you to pose your question?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I actually have several statements.
Okay.
And then a question.
Okay.
We talk about racism. It's pervasive in everything that we do, and it's sometimes so subtle that when you come from a country that has predominantly black people or other kinds of people, you notice it more when you get to a country where you are in the minority. Why is it that when Chinese people, Korean people, West Indian people, African people, Indian people, anybody moves to Canada or the United States or anywhere else in the world, you are an immigrant? But when a white person moves to somewhere else, they are an expatriate. Same word, meaning the same thing, but the subtle racism in the use of the word is remarkable. And we don't talk about things like that. When we look at the newspaper and we see, it struck me the other day, the Chronicle Herald, the senators who were charged and who had to pay money back. But the picture of the black senator from Nova Scotia was there. But the other white senators who also had to pay money back, their photographs weren't in the newspaper. Just saying. As a Canadian, because that's what I am, I took the oath. I have come to realize that all of us who have come from different countries originally, we all face racism in different ways. Mohamed will not face the same racism that I will face. And not simply because he is male and I'm female, but because he is from Africa and I'm from somewhere else. Louise won't face the same racism that I face. No one else on that panel, well, except my Jamaican friend over there. He may face the same, but then he's from a different island. So racism does in fact cross various bounds in different ways, but we're all subject to it. And as people who live in Nova Scotia, who've chosen to make Nova Scotia our homes, we have to acknowledge that it exists and do what we can to have the conversations. We can't have the conversations behind closed doors because that doesn't get us anywhere, right? I can't go out into the public and say, this is wrong because I am treated as I'm aggressive, right? How dare you bring up that conversation? You have to word it differently, and there have to be subtle subtexts for me to be able to say what I want to say in a language that is, listen, it is a red poster. You can't say it's a red poster. You have to say, well, you know, there may be some shade of, hint of pink maybe in there, and it's a word game, right? It's what we face every day. It's a word game. So, 2 questions.
Questions, yes.
Finally. How long do we have to be here, having taken the oath, before we stop being immigrants?
Okay.
That's the first
That's
question.
one, yeah.
The second question is the one you put to the panel. How is racism holding Nova Scotia back? I posted this on Facebook today. Yesterday, we righted a wrong. The Canadian federal government righted a wrong that was done for the last 10 years to the indigenous people of this country that we now call home. So the United Nations Declaration, all the barriers were taken off by the federal government, okay? And yet still, later in the afternoon, Council refuses to debate, right? Refuses. Well, not refuses, I lie. They lost the vote to have an open and frank discussion and put it to the people about what took place in this province that we call home by someone who was a person responsible for Nova Scotia being Nova Scotia. But why aren't we acknowledging that by his doing that, we have in fact, or he did in fact, do some substantial harm? Because unlike one of the councillors, you're not rewriting history. You are acknowledging the wrongs of history and moving on.
Okay, well said. Thank you. So, lots there to think about. But you had 2 questions, so I will pose the questions. First of all, the interesting question about how long does it take for one to stop being an immigrant? having taken the oath and become a Canadian citizen. I'm sure there are lots of different responses to that and possibly different views on that as well. So what do you think, panel? You stumped them, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, Mohamed.
I think it's two-sided, because if you want to be equitable, sometimes calling someone an immigrant, if you want to use it for the sake of equity, it means some people have certain needs that are more at some level than it would be for other people. And therefore, that discrimination, if you will, or that distinguishing might help to provide the resources or the needs, or to meet the needs of that person or that category of people. So to name people differently might solve that problem. But when it is used negatively to say, where are you from, where are you from, where are you from forever, and then to just let you know and remind you that you don't belong here. So it's a double-edged sword, really. So if you stop calling people immigrant, then maybe that's not the word, maybe we need some other way of saying we need to still make that equitable distinguishing between certain people for the mere fact that the needs are different. For example, you have to provide interpretation services for somebody who doesn't speak the language. If you just treat everybody equally and not equitably, it means people have to come with that and face that barrier, and it's not solved. So it's a double-edged sword that is very hard to deal with. As long as the language is not disparaging, I would say we have to keep it. But when it's used negatively, then it becomes a problem.
Yes.
Just a brief comment.
Yes.
I totally agree with you, and thank you for that, because in Jamaica we live with that all the time. People coming from England to teach in our schools, etc., were called expatriates. But the moment you come up here, you're an immigrant. So it's a colonial term, and it's a hangover from colonialism. And it's out there. I don't know how to change that balance.
Can I just add on that? Like when a lot of white folks goes over to teach English overseas, especially when they come back, so when you have a discussion about different cultures, and they will say that, oh, I understand your challenges because I've been in other countries. But again, that is very wrong idea, because in Korea, because of colonialism, that you are seen as better than, and being white skin is better than less. So we have a lot of cosmetic. Make it white. So being white is, very treated well than somebody who are black went to Korea and then have terrible experiences. So I think that's your privilege when you come back, to say that I understand your challenge.
I just want to insert something, and I'm told I'm allowed 3 seconds of insertion. But I, as an immigrant from growing up in Bermuda, I don't ever want to be called an expat, okay? And some of you may understand that context. Okay, so there is another question that was posed by our colleague here, and that was with respect to the conversation at the Municipal Council yesterday with respect to Cornwallis. Yeah? So I do want to give people an opportunity to respond to that, and then we'll certainly move on to the questions. But does anyone here or in the audience want a word on that? Obviously, this is top of mind for many of us today. Appears not. Okay. So may we have the second question then? Second questioner.
Hi. So my question would be, how do you struggle against the sense of disempowerment as a racialized person? Now, there can be a lot of different layers of disempowerment, but there are two examples that I'm thinking of. So first one would be when racial experiences really get subtle. Now, you know that racism is out there, but sometimes things get really subtle that you ask yourself, is this a racial experience or is this in my head? And this is a very profound moment of disempowerment because your lived experiences tells you that it's related, it's somewhat related to your race at least. But then again, you ask yourself, you doubt yourself. And another sense of disempowerment that I'm thinking of is when you go into space that you're not represented, then you wonder, will my attitude of being aware of this situation influence this interaction? To what extent will this influence this interaction? And all these doubts against yourself is a very, I think, disempowering and tiring moments. So I wanted to ask how you struggle against them. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, and it certainly does. Sure. It dovetails with a narrative we've been hearing about a bit of fear and concern about expressing what your experience is. Does anyone want to respond to that from the panel?
Well, when I'm just going to be honest that I have experiences like that, and I don't want to share any names or any details of the situation, but sometimes you just can't pursue any further because you don't want it to be in a situation where you know if you speak aloud about it and you're going to lose a job opportunity, and you don't want it to raise that issues and file a human rights complaint because you don't want to be the one sitting on the paper and everybody pointing fingers at you, and you do having a second doubt of whether it's worth your time, and sometimes it's not really worth of your time. It's whether is this going to do a further harm to yourself or it's just going to solve the problems. And you will just have to balance that on your own time, I think. And I know it's very hard, and I just encountered a situation like that, and the day, I'm going to be honest, after this situation has happened for 2 weeks, and I still haven't come to a conclusion yet, so I still don't know what I'm going to do, because I know if I file a complaint that I'm going to lose a job opportunity. So I'm still struggling.
Very honest. Anyone else?
Ditto.
Okay, ditto. I'm just going to go to the live stream question, and then I'll get to you, and I've got a couple more as well. But there is a general live stream question, and that is, what do you do to deal with the rage expressed to others? Not sure quite what the questioner is asking. What do you do to deal with the rage expressed, maybe to those who are in the category of others? Perhaps that's what the person means. Let's assume that that's what they mean. If not, they'll correct me. But what do you do to deal with the rage expressed toward those who are othered? Make sense? Anyone? Is that the question? Okay. So what do you do about the rage expressed to the dominant group? I'm going to say the dominant group rather than others to make it clear. It means the people in the majority.
You mean white? Yes.
Okay. May I ask the panelists to respond, and then I see people in the audience who want to have a go at responding to that as well.
Is this a simple way to say that when I'm angry at the people who are privileged, or is it? Yeah.
You know, I'm assuming that the person feels that sometimes there's rage expressed to the dominant culture who are predominantly white. Right? And so they want to know. how we deal with that.
So I had a really beautiful moment of facing the being an ally of a racialized woman, and I had to talk with this white woman who won my sympathy and want to, have my, come on, you can understand me, because I was the ally of the racialized woman. So we had a heated debates and all that, but I couldn't agree with her in one bit, because and we were heating up, and then we were heating up the conversation, and I had to say that, look, as far as you are in the position of a privilege, then I'm an ally of the racialized woman. I cannot say that it's okay. So I think sometimes race has to be there, because there is no solutions in racial line, and if you want to be an ally, you have to be strong about it. So I was proud of myself that I had that race over somebody who doesn't recognize the privilege. I don't know if it is the answer.
Okay. We have a lot of comments coming and not that much time. So I'm going to go to the microphones and ask you to be really succinct so everyone there will have a chance to be heard.
Okay, I just wanted to make a comment in relation to this, and also to the being disempowered. In relation to this, I think that that's actually part of the conversation, and it'd be really nice to see public facilitated conversations of how to sit with uncomfortable moments, because I don't think that a solution would be to make white people feel more comfortable. I think that the solution is, or a suggestion would be, to talk about what do we do in uncomfortable circumstances, because the natural tendency to move towards making people comfortable is part of what disenfranchises those of us who are in racialized groups. And in terms of the person who is feeling... and in terms of the person who is experiencing disempowerment, I think that conversations like this, and then finding networks and allies within your community to talk about and process those moments of trauma and microaggressions is really powerful. I understand and appreciate the space for allies, but there's some conversations that you need to process before you can even include allies, because so much harm and so much violence has been done that a way to enter into that is, what is it called, trauma-informed practice in terms of social work, and that. I think applying that in terms of this context, because what is happening is emotional violence to some of us. So being able to unpack that in order to then be supported, I think is useful. So I think in terms of the being disempowered, finding support networks amongst ourselves as immigrants, and then engaging with allies.
Excellent. Thank you so much. May I ask?
Hi, everyone. I'm actually new to Nova Scotia. I'm not new to Canada. I've been in Canada like 30 years ago. My first son was born in Ontario, and my other son also. I have two children who are living in Toronto, and I've been living in Toronto, going and come back, and then I've been living in Toronto for 10 years, and then I wanted to share my experience with you that I actually tried to find a job, go for PhD, and try every step to do one step to go forward. I have qualifications. I have masters from UK. I'm from Iran. I'm immigrant, and I know most of people are immigrant here. But the reason that I came to Canada was because I thought Canada is actually talking about freedom, talking about equal opportunities for everyone, and talking about we are happy for being a multiculturalism society.
Right.
And this is the honesty that I came for.
Sure.
Okay.
So your question.
My question is, I think it's not related to people, to Canadian people, it's related to the system.
Yeah.
So basically, if I'm going to put myself in a situation to actually help the Canadian society and help everyone to actually participate in the society, so why is it something that will actually put you backward instead of helping you to go forward.
Okay.
The thing is, I thought I'm trying to actually teach people how to pronounce my name because I'm from Middle East.
Yes.
But I found out 2 days ago that even I actually met a woman from France, and she told me that she's been here for 10 years and 4 years, and she couldn't actually get a job. So
no
I was
disrespect,
wondering,
but I need your question because we have to share this.
So I just want to know, we are all immigrants, so what should we do if nobody from the system is here to hear all these stories?
That's a good question. All right. So we need to have people from the system to be with us. What do people have to say about that on the panel? Quickly, we really are running out of time. Give us a response.
Agree.
Yeah, they need to be here. They need to be here in more numbers than they are. Fair.
Maybe that should go in the evaluation.
Yes, please use that opportunity. So yes, please, quickly. Yep.
Thank you for all the speech. I'm really proud of, especially for Louise, because she shows how Chinese people do care our community and our rights. And my question is how, because I'm undergraduate and I'm Chinese students, how to balance the relationship between students and professors, because we are not immigrated and we do sometimes the professors controls our life for the grades. So I just wonder, like, if the resist happens, and how can we protect ourselves and how can we deal with the situation over there? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Louise, do you have a really quick response to that?
Well, yes, I think, first of all, I think you should identify what happened and write down what the moment that you feel discriminated against by your professor, and then take it to a higher authority or perhaps some supported group within your school. And maybe we can talk about it in the reception time?
Yes, that's the exact thing I wanted you to say. Thank you so much. Wow, what a good panel. So, the last question for live streaming is, Mohamed, have you experienced any hostility in Nova Scotia as a Muslim immigrant in light of recent terrorist attacks in the media?
Oh, God, yeah. This is what I didn't want to touch. I don't know if I should say it. It's very deep. It relates to my family. I'm going to leave the major part of it. I'm going to tell you, for 6 consecutive times, anytime I traveled for work for personal reasons, the first one happening on the 21st of March, 2010, I was stopped at the Halifax International Airport and pulled away separately and given special treatment, special not in a positive way, and went and came back, the same thing in Ottawa. And my next travel, it was my next travel and next travel and next. So every single time. So it wasn't random anymore. So anytime I asked, they told me it's random. I said, no, somebody must have put it in there. And they will stand there on the phone, and while I'm there, asking me for extra identification and talking, and then they would label my boarding pass. So when I get to security, they give me a special path. So that happened so many times that I had to take it to the Human Rights Commission. 2010, and the case is still on. So, and that was not my first case. So I don't want to take so much time, and my family got affected by this. So my voice is trembling now. I'm just going to stop. So the answer is a big yes.
Yes, okay, thank you, Mohamed. And we have no, we don't. One more question? Okay, one more question that I can offer. Oh, did you want to speak? Okay, all right.
Just a quick comment.
Yes.
The way to get government officials or anyone that you would like to see here is individually to write them. So you can't just leave it up to the organizations. You have to say, I was at this event, I need to see you there, because the more emails they get, the more they think about the issue.
Okay. Good advice. Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity for being here, and I think we had a great exchange, and Thank you to all of my colleagues on the panel, and thank you to all of you. And I'm going to hand it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sharon.
All right, well, you're not done clapping because I'm here to thank everyone, the audience, certainly Sharon for moderating, but also to David, to Nanok, to Louise, and Mohamed for participating. So one more round of applause, please. So I'm charged with some brief concluding remarks, and I will keep them brief. One of my own, and then kind of a highlight reel from the panel. As the anthropologist in the room, I actually think it's also really important to remember that we can't geographically locate racism. It's a pan-human experience. Canada is not the only racist country in North America. It's not the only racist country on the globe. I lived in Vietnam, and there's lots of minorities in Vietnam and a majority population. I know the case is the same in China and in Korea, and I have less familiarity with Jamaica and Sierra Leone, but Canada's not alone. It's a global problem, and I was really quite shocked at how bad it was when I came back to Canada, I'll be perfectly honest, because I had made the mistake of geographically locating racism in the southern United States. And indeed, when I came back to Canada 5 years ago, I was quite shocked by the racism here. In terms of the highlight reel, wow, it was hard to pick, but I'll just comment. Nanok's notion, I thought, of using your privilege is actually very important and something for us all to reflect on. Mohamed's notion of wanting to change the narrative about our communities, I think, is also very, very important, and it relates, of course, quite directly to privilege, especially white privilege. David certainly acknowledging that it is a war, I think, is actually very important, and recognizing that at the very least it's a battle, and one that is the other side's winning right now. I think it's pretty clear to me. In fact, I guess whose side am I on? And then I think Louise's pointing to those various forms of racism is also something I think we really have to keep in mind, because it does come in many ways, and Sarah talked about it in the audience as well. With that, I just have a few things that I need to do to bring us to a close here. I want to thank the live stream audience as well for joining us tonight, and encourage you to send more feedback, all right, through the live stream option. And then again, for you guys in the audience, please fill out those comment cards. They're very important to SISEPA for having basically the data or the information we need to continue to providing the program that you want. The public is who we're here for, so it's good to hear from you. And once again, that information at the back of the room, the table back there, stuff there for you to pick up and take home. And certainly stay tuned for the next and the final segment of this series on Indigenous perspectives, again, to be announced. And please, there's a reception out back, lots of more time to talk to our panelists. Like Sharon wanted to comment on keeping the comments short, my comment here is, please, when it's over, move out to the reception and allow our panelists to also come up to the reception right afterwards, all right? And thank you once again for coming.